Bob as a person is the fairest person I've ever met. He is also the most honest person I've ever met. He ran the office in a very clean manner. Everybody had to do their best for the people of the state of New York, and we did.
Because he was never dictatorial. He never sort of said, it's going to be my way or the highway. He always wanted to know your point of view. He would always want to test his own thinking against your thinking.
He believed in us. He supported us. He gave us the running room we needed to make a difference. It was the greatest 12 years of my professional life, probably the greatest years of my whole life.
Bob was a tremendous quick study. He was very gifted at getting to the heart of technical environmental issues and legal issues, and all you had to do was give him a briefing, and he immediately understood.
One of the things that I've always told people is that anytime that I had to meet with him and there was a decision to be made about what to do or what policy to take, that it always struck me that he would always ask after all the discussion, well, what's the right thing to do?
You know, Bob's dad often used to say, can you imagine the Attorney General of New York State grew up in my home? And he would get so emotional, and the truth is, I feel the same way. I feel very lucky to have been married to Bob all these years.
He was blazing a trail on acid rain issues, on toxic exposure issues, on cleaning up Love Canal, cleaning up rivers, protecting the Adirondack Park. He was about 20 years ahead of his time.
Working with Bob for 8 years in 2 different bureaus was the best time of my life. I've been a judge now for 21 years, and without my experience as an assistant attorney general, I would never have been able to do the job that I've done.
He unleashed us to tackle all kinds of environmental problems, from Love Canal and acid rain to criminal prosecution of environmental criminals. And if only we could have made him president, we might have halted and reversed climate change by now. Tremendous man.
One thing I have to say is it was such a collegial atmosphere, and I can only say that I always enjoyed working there. And as an aside, my son married Bob's daughter, so we're now family.
Bob was the first Attorney General really to establish the New York Attorney General's office as a national force. And I know other folks, take credit for having done that, but it was truly in the Abrams administration. The pursuit of justice, the pursuit of public service, is something that Bob believes in very deeply. And it's an honor to be here with you, and it's an honor to stand here as your successor. The reason that I was able to get involved and end up as chairing a committee that included a lot of federal agencies who are not used to providing the same level of respect to state officials as they probably should, was that we had the Martin Act, and again, contrary to public impressions, Bob was the one who first dusted off the Martin Act and used it in this context. So thank you very much. And every time I'm publicly attacked in the press by a banker, I think of Bob. And I look forward to carrying on this tradition, and I also have been proud to share the tradition of the office with our federal counterparts. It's about time some of the folks in DC started to watch what we do in this office a little more closely. And this is not an era in which, as you know, Bob did great work on securities, on antitrust, because during the Reagan era, they weren't that interested in it, and during the George W. Bush era, there's a gap to fill. Right now, it's a different situation. Right now, it's a time to bring our colleagues along and get them participating in this effort to follow our tradition of seeking to enforce the idea that there is in America still a commitment to one set of rules for everyone, and that there are people in government who view our job as enforcing the law, no matter who you're enforcing it against, and of standing up for ordinary people in their day-to-day lives. That is our tradition. And, you know, the substance of what we're doing is a little bit different. The principles that we're following are exactly the same. And Bob, I have to tell you, I think that there is so much momentum, and the tradition is so deeply rooted in the office, and there are many of my colleagues here tonight who still I'm lucky enough to have working with me. I cannot imagine any attorney general turning from it anytime in the foreseeable future. I feel inspired by it. I feel compelled by it all the time. And I thank all of you, because I do understand very well that while we have to make some of the decisions, you do the work. Thank all of you for creating the greatest public law firm in the United States. And thank you, Bob, for inviting me here tonight.
Now look, the room is filled with people who have served the state of New York. The room is filled with people who had put in years of service. But there is one person, and this is a surprise, big surprise. There is one person in this room who has served longer than anyone else in this room or anyone else in the history of the Attorney General's office, and I want him to come up here, Sandy Mindel. This says, and I wrote it, Lifetime Achievement Award presented to Stephen E. Mindel for a lifetime of dedication, service, and accomplishment in the New York State Attorney General's office. Sandy Mindel, after graduation from Yale and Columbia Law School, began his career as a lawyer in the Attorney General's office in 1960. That is 52 years ago. For 52 years, he has served in the administrations of 7 attorneys general. He has won the admiration and respect of his colleagues in New York and in offices of attorneys general across the nation. His long hours of legal craftsmanship and advocacy have been coupled with good humor, sprinkled with large measures of Yiddish phrases, which has enlightened and brought smiles to both colleagues and adversaries. He pursued his lifetime service in the Attorney General's office as a calling, continuing to work on matters for years beyond his formal retirement. Sandy Mindel has earned the appreciation of the citizens of the state of New York and consumers throughout the United States, and it's signed by me.
Thank you, thank you. Baba, gesunden dein Keppeler. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here. In fact, at my age, I'm glad to be anywhere. It's been an honor to work in the Attorney General's office for 52 years. The highlight of those years were my service under Bob Abrams. I know that Bob Abrams is the gold standard of Attorney Generals, not only in New York State, but in Attorney General's offices all over the country. He has a deep and abiding philosophy, which is a simple one. He lives by the golden rule. Whenever there's a problem of public importance in any of the states, or even in New York, the first question is, what would Bob Abrams do? What does Bob Abrams think? And that's because he has earned the respect of so many people, not only in the legal community, but citizens, consumers all over. I am so honored to be able to be here and to thank Bob for giving me the opportunity of working with him. And I thank you all for being colleagues of mine. Some of you I know, some of you I think I know. Thank you very much.
Wait. Where's the top? Look at the top. One of my first meetings with Sandy, he's briefing me on a case, and he says, Mr. Attorney General, do you know what the second most passionate relationship in life is? And I look at him, what's the guy talking about? He says, landlord-tenant.
You know, it was a very special office. And sometimes things are coincidental time-wise, because when I was having breakfast this morning, I picked up the Albany Times-Union, which is my regular reading for breakfast. And the headline was, Cuomo wants best and brightest. And the story was that he was taking the appointments office in the governor's office, which has long been in the governor's office, and he was moving it to one of the agencies, OGS, to professionalize, and that was the word he used, the men and women who are selected for top jobs in state agencies and state boards. And I see this, and I know I'm coming here tonight, and I say, you don't have to reorganize government to do this. You just hire the same way Bob hired. But, you know, coming here tonight, I was trying to think, why did it really work? You know, what sort of made it work for everybody here? And there are a lot of reasons, and you know, you can go through and list them, but let me just mention one. And the more I reflect, the more I think this was the key to this office, and that we had an Attorney General who was willing to listen to us, his staff. We would come up with cockamamie theories. We would come up with ideas that the office had never tried. We would come up with untested legal theories, and we'd bring them to Bob, sitting as Attorney General. And he listened to us. He didn't throw us out of his office and say, this has never been done before, you guys are crazy. And he didn't always say yes. Sometimes he'd, you know, say, I'll go with it. Sometimes he said, no, I don't think we should go with it. But he listened, and because he listened, we were all encouraged to think differently, think expansively. If you will, using today's vernacular, think out of the box. And we also, it was almost like a competition among us. Who could come up with the theories that we could then sell to Bob so that we could do it? And there was a dynamic in the office that really, really made it work. And I think that was really one of the really important features. And of course, the end result is what we now know is that Bob's office really developed the modern Attorney General's office.
You know, I marvel at the fact that someone like me could come to the Attorney General's office as a line assistant Attorney General, have the opportunity to progress to become Bureau Chief, and then to gain the confidence of Bob to appoint me as Solicitor General. But what I took from that appointment was an affirmation of the confidence that Bob had in the office. And over the last 15 years, I've devoted significant attention to leadership and team building. And I've thought a lot about Bob's legacy and the Department of Law and what was the magic of that experience. Because it gave me a great feeling. I didn't have to intellectually analyze it. It was just intuitive. It was a feeling. And you know, Maya Angelou said, we don't always remember the things that, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, we don't always remember the things that people said to us, but we do remember how people made us feel. And I think that's part of the magic of Bob's leadership. So it started with, obviously, Bob has a lot of charisma, we know that. And it really articulated a grand vision for us, what we could do in the public interest. And then he sought to bring in the best and the brightest without regard to political affiliation. And he embraced diversity. You know, he made all of us feel, whether we were a minority, African American, regardless of our gender or our religion or sexual orientation, he made us feel like part of a team, that we were valued. It's just not bringing the talent in. It's how you attend to it once it's there. It's how you engage that talent. It's how you make that talent feels valued and want to contribute, to give beyond your own high standards, but that discretionary effort, that you're part of something that's much bigger than the individual parts. And that's a wonderful feeling, and I think that's part of the magic that Bob created in the Attorney General's office.
So Bob calls last week and asks me to speak, and I was really pleased because for me, and I know for many of you, the years we worked for Bob Abrams were transformative. Like so many folks who left the public interest sector and came to work for Bob. It was the Reagan years, and we found a home with Bob Abrams. And we learned, and I learned, that litigating in the name of Bob Abrams was a hell of a lot more powerful than litigating on behalf of an individual civil rights complainant. And there's 3 cases that I remember particularly that we brought when I ran the Civil Rights Bureau that I have to raise. One was the squeal rule case. Do you remember when President Reagan said that family planning clinics would have to notify the parents of adolescents seeking birth control? So in the name of the Attorney General of the state of New York, we challenged it and we went to federal court. We won, but what I really remember is, God knows why, but Bob decides to come with me that day when I'm arguing it. So that just, I'll never forget that because I had Bob by my side. Made me very nervous. The next was, we brought the first case, HIV discrimination, right? Joan's nodding her head. It was, we sued a co-op on 12th Street in the Village because they were kicking out a dentist for seeing HIV positive patients. And we brought the case and we won. But that's not why I remember it. I remember briefing Bob late into the evening on September 29th. And what happens? I go home and go into labor with my first child. For 24 hours I'm in labor. I can't be there for the press conference, but I won't go to the hospital to give birth to my son Daniel until I see Bob on the 5 o'clock news. That's what I remember. And then the last one, really, I mean, we brought cases. Bob was on the cutting edge of civil rights cases. We were in the Supreme Court on every abortion case. We were on the right side of every issue. And I don't think Bob ever said no
when we came in with a good idea. Okay, last one. Sheila Abdul-Salam. Oh, there's Sheila. Sheila will remember this. Sheila and I had a great secretary, Angela, in the Civil Rights Bureau, and she was on the bus, and her female bus driver, remember this, was complaining to her that women couldn't get promoted in the MTA. And because they promoted based on longevity, and because women had only been recently hired, women couldn't get promoted. So we started a lawsuit. And it went all the way to the New York State Court of Appeals. And as we were getting ready, we called our friend, who's not here tonight, Peter Sherwood, who was then at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and we asked Peter to moot court us, right? Peter moot courted us, and he told us we could never win. But we did, right? We won that case too, and the Court of Appeals. And again, Bob stood with us. It was, I mean, and that's what we did over and again. Now, why do I remember that case? Not only because Peter told us we couldn't win, because I happened to be reading the obituaries, and the Supreme Court justice that had decided in our favor when he died, in his obituary, they mentioned this lawsuit. So I was like, oh my God, we really did good stuff. So it really, I think all of us who left public interest jobs to work for Bob Abrams, and a lot of you are here tonight, and some of you are still working for Eric, and we really learned what the power of government is. Now, my one last point is, we also learned, and I'm looking at Tim, we learned the power of the press. Now, let's be clear. Those press releases that Tim and Nathan churned out, we liked seeing our name in print, but he could be a little annoying. This wasn't about the, but we learned it all mattered. Working for a committed public official who the Times would pay attention to, who the paper would pay attention to, really was that extra oomph on the litigation we filed. So when I left government in 1987, I knew I would go back because there's no better way to make a difference, and Bob showed us that. So thank you.
All right, a few words from me. You know, I spent 15 years in the office, and some of you may have wondered, why did you leave? I mean, well, I'm going to give you a little insight. Being the Attorney General, you're a statewide official. New York is a big state, 62 counties, 17 million people. If you live in Western New York in Chautauqua County in the city of Jamestown, you're closer to the capital of Ohio than you are to the capital of New York. It's a huge state. And when you're an elected official, and let's say you were going to get inaugurated, you had to be sensitive to upstate and downstate. And so I got elected 4 times, and I would have 2 inaugurations, one downstate, one upstate. So the 4th time I got reelected, or the 3rd time I got reelected, the 4th time I was elected, I had an induction ceremony downstate, and I had one in Buffalo. And at this Buffalo ceremony, we asked the Monsignor to give the invocation. And he said, "May the Lord shower his blessings on the Eternal General of the state of New York." And I said to myself, there's a message here. Now, we all did wonderful substantive work, but there were also certain personal things that happened within the office. Paul Ann Kaplowitz was here. When she's still here. When I was a candidate for Attorney General, I made a big issue about utilities and the Public Service Commission. I said in New York State, we don't have a PSC that stands for the Public Service Commission. It's the Private Service Commission. It's the Puppet Service Commission. We've had 62 rate increases from utilities, and guess how many were rubber stamped by the PSC? All 62. The people of New York need a fighter to fight against those rate increases. And if I ever was given the opportunity to be your Attorney General, I would be that kind of fighter before the Public Service Commission. So I got to be the Attorney General, and I tried to create a Utilities Bureau. But Warren Anderson, who was the upstate leader, the majority leader from Binghamton, he wouldn't have any part of giving a budget allocation for a Utilities Bureau. But we were determined to do whatever we could. So carving out of reorganization, we put together a little unit 3-4 lawyers to take on the major utilities. And one of the heads of that unit was Pauline Kaplowitz. And she comes in to see me, and it's interesting what Richard said, because I did listen. She came in to see me one day. She said, Bob, there's a plant, a nuclear plant in upstate New York outside of Rochester, the Ginna plant. It went down, it had an accident. And you know, it's going to cost millions of dollars to put that plant back online. And the utility company has made a rate increase request to go and impose the cost of that repair on the consumers. And it's not the burden of the consumers, because you know that plant went down because of the negligence of the company. She started explaining to me, you know, what happened, and the pipes and this and that. And it was really the fault of the company, and the consumers didn't have to pay for it. And we have the legal arguments, but Bob, you can't win a case in front of the Public Service Commission unless you have an expert. A scientific expert. The lawyering is not enough. They look to an expert. And we got to hire an expert. I said, okay. She said, I found an expert. And she started to tell me about Dr. Herman Sheets. Dr. Herman Sheets was a man who was born in Europe, escaped the Nazis. He had this unbelievably distinguished record. He was a scientist, he was an inventor, he was a professor. He got all kinds of awards and accolades. He ran an electric boat company in Groton, Connecticut, and he was very distinguished. He said, if we had him, we would be able to win this case. I said, okay, we'll hire him. We'll go out and hire him. And we won the case. Now, Pauline not only fell in love with the work of Dr. Sheets, she fell in love with Dr. Sheets. And she married him. In 2006, Dr. Sheets passed away at the age of 97, with Pauline having been married to Dr. Sheets for 24 years. Another story that intertwined not only the substance, but the personal lives. And it's interesting because Jerry Boone mentioned this. When my wife went to law school, she was a Columbia class of 1964. There was 6 women in her section. By the time I became Attorney General in 1979, women had begun to go in large numbers to law schools, coming out, and we had more and more lawyers as women. And there were issues for the women coming out in the workplace because they wanted to be able to get quality work, pursue their profession, but they had responsibilities at home, parenting responsibilities. And it was a real tension between the two. How do you still pursue your profession and be a good parent and meet your responsibility as a parent? So some of the women came in to see me in the office. They said, Bob, I think you should establish a job sharing program, a flex time program. And they began to explain to me, you know, what it was and what it would involve. And, you know, they said, look, it would be pioneering. It's not done anywhere in any governmental agency in the country, and it's not done in the private sector. But we should do it because it's right. And then I found out, too, if we did it, it would be good management, because we would be able to retain lawyers, women who might leave because they wouldn't be given the opportunity to spend more time with their child or children. And we might become a magnet for women who don't have this opportunity in the private sector or governmental agencies. And so we adopted a job share program that ultimately had 30 participants, 2 people sharing a single line with full health benefits. And the New York Times did a story, and in that story there was a quote from an assistant attorney general, and she was talking about how this is such an important program. I gave birth to this young son, and if I didn't have an opportunity to work in flex time, you know, I probably would have left the office, or my son would not have had the kind of nurturing that he certainly deserves. And this program was so important. So let's fast forward 25 years. And wouldn't you know it, that little boy meets my younger daughter, and they got married 2 years ago. And they're here tonight, Dan Greenwald and my daughter Becky. Okay, 2 more minutes. So, you know, we did so many great things together, but I think it's important for you to know that the group has continued to do great things. Within the office, there are 30 members of the Attorney General's office here tonight who were from our days and during our administration, so they continue to do great things. I'm so proud of it. 44 of assistants who worked during my administration have gone on to become judges on the federal, state level, or administrative law judges. 44. 3 went on to become members of the Assembly. Tonight, we have the deputy mayor of the city of New York and the woman who is the counsel to Mayor Bloomberg, who is an assistant in my office. We have a district attorney of Broome County, where Binghamton is located. We have a chief assistant of Queens County here tonight. We have the president of the Health and Hospital Corporation of the City of New York. Jerry is the president of the Civil Service Commission. Deborah was the deputy health commissioner of the state of New York. More than 15 of the former assistants are law professors in law schools throughout the country. We have partners, we now have partners in law firms who worked in the office. Attorneys in important positions in corporate America. Attorneys serving not-for-profit organizations and those who lead and head not-for-profit organizations. Many continued to serve in the Attorney General's office, and Eric Schneiderman appointed 3 people who were assistants in my tenure to current positions in his office. He appointed Jane Asia as the head of the Consumer Fraud Bureau. He appointed Marissa Peisman as the head of the Real Estate Finance Bureau. And he appointed Lisa Dell as the head of the Litigation Bureau. One of our number went on to become the owner of a minor league baseball team. He's the president and general manager of the New Britain Rockcats. And my favorite on the list, one grades the bar exams for the New York State Board of Law Examiners. And I hope she comes and meets my son-in-law. He took the bar exam this last summer. All right, so the hour is late. Let me just finally conclude to say, obviously, this was an extraordinary period in my lifetime. 15 wonderful, exciting years. Yes, because we pursued important things in the public interest, but yes, because of the people who I worked with. They were wonderful. You were wonderful. They were talented. They were skilled. They were dedicated. They were professional. They loved their work. There was no punching of a time clock. They came in early and worked late and worked weekends. They stood for the right things. We were up against powerful forces, major law firms, major opposition, and yet we would prevail because of the dedication and the talent of the people in this room. So I'm here tonight to say how thrilled I am to be with you, how thrilled I am to provide the forum and the opportunity for us to all get together again and to recount the exciting things that we did. And I'm here to thank you for being allied with me in fighting for the public interest, to make this world a better place, to improve the lives of New Yorkers. It was a special period of time. It was a special bond of friendship. It was a special sense of loyalty. and I will treasure those days for the rest of my life. Thank you very much.